They say love doesn't end in one big explosion. It ends quietly, like a candle burning down to its last flicker. You don't notice the smoke until it's already choking you. I used to think heartbreak was dramatic, people crying, shouting, throwing things. But that's not how mine happened. Mine ended in silence, over dinner. Surrounded by laughter, music, and people who had no idea I was falling apart right there in front of them. You know that feeling when everyone around you is having fun, and you're smiling, but deep down, something in you feels wrong? That was me that night. Sitting across from the man I loved, in a restaurant that smelled of roasted lamb and cheap perfume, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But it wasn't. The lights were soft, the kind that make everything look prettier than it really is. Glasses clinked, forks scraped against plates, and someone's laughter, his laughter, cut through me like glass. I remember staring at him, the way he leaned back in his chair, so comfortable, so confident. Like he owned the moment. Like he owned me. He looked good that night, too. That kind of good that makes you forget all the fights, the distance, the coldness. But then he opened his mouth, and said something that changed everything. He didn't whisper it. He didn't say it privately. No. He said it loud enough for the whole table to hear. He smiled, oh, that smile, and said, "My ex is coming. If you're jealous, just pay for the party and go home." And everyone laughed. Everyone. But I didn't. I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen. I don't even think I blinked. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open and swallow me whole. You ever felt that kind of humiliation? The kind that doesn't just sting, but burns from the inside out? It's like your body is still there, but your soul just leaves the room. I remember staring down at my plate, the food blurring through the tears I refused to let fall. And in that exact moment, I realized something. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was his punchline. And the worst part? I smiled back. Because I didn't want them to see me break. I didn't want them to know he'd just shattered something inside me that I could never put back together. They kept laughing. He kept talking. And I just sat there, my heart quietly breaking under the noise. But you know what's funny? Sometimes the moment your heart breaks is also the moment you wake up. Because that dinner, those few words, that humiliation, it changed everything. You're watching Stories by TE. And before we dive into what really happened that night, the stares, the ex, the fallout, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes, the truth hides behind the laughter, and this story, trust me, will make you question what love is supposed to feel like. You know, people always say relationships take work. But what they don't tell you is, sometimes you're the only one doing the work. When Marcus and I first met, he was everything I thought I wanted. He had this confidence that drew people in, that smile that made you feel seen. I still remember our first date. He talked about dreams, plans, the kind of life we'd build together. He made me laugh so much that night, my cheeks actually hurt. He was charming in a way that felt effortless. Back then, he used to send me messages in the middle of the day, just to say he missed me. He'd show up at my office with my favorite snacks, or leave little notes on my car windshield. Small things. The kind that make you believe you found something real. And maybe I did, at first. But somewhere along the line, something changed. Not suddenly, no. Slowly. Like a soft leak that you don't notice until everything's flooded. The texts stopped. The calls got shorter. His tone turned sharper. I started feeling like an inconvenience, like loving me was something he had to schedule between meetings and moods. Our apartment, once warm, full of laughter and late-night movies, turned into a museum of silence. The walls still smelled of the vanilla candles I loved, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like I was living with a stranger. A stranger who used to love me. He'd come home late, mumbling something about work or traffic. Sometimes he'd walk straight to the shower without even looking at me. And when I tried to talk, to ask if something was wrong, he'd just say, "You overthink too much, Lydia. Not everything's about you." That line, it became his favorite shield. And I became his easy target. He started bringing up his ex more often. Not directly, not enough for me to call him out. But in small, cutting ways. "She used to love spicy food. You can't even handle pepper. She was more social, not shy like you. She never complained this much." At first, I'd laugh it off. Pretend I didn't notice the comparison. But you can only pretend for so long before it starts eating at you. I found myself changing, without even realizing it. Wearing the kind of dresses she used to wear. Trying new recipes because he mentioned she liked them. Even straightening my hair more often because he once said he missed her curls. You know that desperate feeling, trying to be enough for someone who keeps moving the goalpost? That was me. Every single day. And the sad part? I thought that was love. I thought endurance meant strength. I told myself, relationships aren't easy, Lydia. You just have to be patient. But what I didn't understand then was, patience doesn't heal pride. And Marcus's pride had already poisoned us. He started going out more with his friends, those ones who called themselves the boys. Loud, carefree, and sometimes cruel in the way they joked. They'd tease him, saying things like, "Man, you got lucky. Most women would have left you by now." And Marcus would just laugh. He'd actually laugh. I'd sit there, pretending to scroll through my phone, smiling weakly, praying no one would notice the shame on my face. They called me the calm one, like it was a compliment. But I knew what they meant. They meant quiet. Submissive. The one who doesn't fight back. And they were right. I didn't fight back. Not because I was weak, but because I was tired. Tired of arguing with someone who twisted every word into a weapon. There were nights I'd sit on the couch after he'd gone to bed, just staring at our reflection in the dark TV screen. Two blurred shapes, side by side, yet miles apart. I remember thinking, when did love start to feel like begging? Sometimes I'd whisper to myself, maybe he's just stressed. Maybe I'm asking too much. I blamed myself for everything, for his silence, for his temper, even for the way he looked at other women. It's embarrassing now, but I used to pray for the version of him I first met to come back. The one who made me feel alive, wanted, adored. But that man was gone. In his place was someone colder, sharper, someone who knew exactly how to make me doubt my worth, and did it anyway. Looking back, I think he enjoyed the control. The way I tiptoed around his moods, the way I apologized for things I didn't even do. It made him feel powerful. And I just wanted peace. That's the thing about emotional exhaustion. You stop looking for love, and you start looking for silence. You start settling for less pain instead of more happiness. If someone had told me then that it would all lead to that humiliating dinner, I might have laughed. I would have said, no, Marcus wouldn't do that to me. But he did. Because the truth is, people don't just wake up and humiliate you out of nowhere. They practice in small ways, every joke at your expense, every ignored text, every subtle comparison, until one day, they do it out loud. In front of everyone. And by then, you're too broken to even fight. That's where I was before that night. A woman clinging to the scraps of a love that was already gone. But if only I knew what was coming, how one dinner invitation would pull the last thread holding me together, maybe I would have walked away sooner. Maybe. Brief pause, reflective tone, but life doesn't give you warnings like that, does it? It just shows you. In the cruelest way possible. A week before that dinner, things actually felt lighter. Marcus had just gotten promoted at work, and for the first time in months, I saw a spark of excitement in his eyes. He came home earlier than usual, tossed his briefcase on the couch, and hugged me, tight, unexpected, almost like the old days. I remember that hug. How it made my heart ache in a good way. You know that feeling when you start to believe maybe, just maybe, things are getting better? That's exactly where I was. He told me he was planning a small dinner party to celebrate with his colleagues and friends. His voice was warm, easy, familiar. Nothing big, he said. Just dinner, drinks, a few laughs. You'll come, right? Of course I said yes. I didn't even think twice. Because in my mind, this was our chance to reconnect. To show everyone we were still solid, still us. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay beside him staring at the ceiling, planning everything in my head. What I'd wear. How I'd style my hair. How I'd finally feel seen again. It sounds silly now, but I wanted to remind him of who I was, the woman he used to look at like I was his favorite thing in the world. The morning of the dinner, I woke up early. I made him breakfast, his favorite. Scrambled eggs, toast, and just the right amount of sugar in his coffee. I even placed a small note beside his plate that said, "I'm proud of you." He barely noticed it. Just mumbled a thanks and kept scrolling through his phone. Still, I smiled. I told myself he was probably just nervous about the night. I went out that afternoon to buy a new dress. Something elegant but simple, deep emerald green, because he once said it made my eyes look softer. When I got home, I tried it on in front of the mirror. For the first time in a long while, I actually liked what I saw. I felt beautiful. Hopeful. Ready. Marcus walked into the room while I was zipping up the dress. He looked me up and down, gave a small smirk, and said, "You look nice." Just that. No warmth. No excitement. Just, nice. But I clung to it anyway. Because when you've been starving for affection, even crumbs feel like a feast. Then, just as I was clearing the breakfast plates, he said it, so casually, like it meant nothing. "Oh, by the way, Tasha will be there tonight." I froze. I actually thought I'd misheard him. "Tasha?" I asked. He didn't even look up from his phone. "Yeah. My ex. She's part of the client team now. It's no big deal. Don't act weird, okay?" And just like that, something inside me cracked. I laughed at first, a nervous, shaky laugh that didn't sound like me. "Wait, you're joking, right?" He looked up then, just for a second, and gave me that condescending half-smile he used whenever he thought I was being too emotional. "Lydia," he said, "please don't make this a thing. She's just part of the group. You know I can't control who my company invites." I wanted to say something, to ask why he hadn't mentioned it earlier, why he thought I'd be comfortable sitting across from a woman he used to love, but I couldn't find the words. It was like every sentence I thought of got stuck in my throat. So I just nodded. Smiled. And said, "Sure. No problem." But inside, my heart dropped. You ever felt that? When your body's calm but your mind is screaming? That was me. I smiled through it, cleared the dishes, even made a joke about needing extra makeup so I wouldn't look jealous. He laughed, not realizing that behind that joke was a woman slowly unraveling. For the rest of the day, I moved like a ghost, packing my purse, checking my lipstick, smiling at my reflection even though I barely recognized the woman looking back. Every little sound, the hum of the fan, the clinking of my bracelet, felt too loud, like the world was mocking the storm building in my chest. He got ready effortlessly, humming while adjusting his tie, texting someone, probably confirming the guest list. I kept wondering if someone was her. I remember standing by the door, watching him fix his collar in the mirror, and thinking, does he even realize what he's doing to me right now? Or worse, does he realize, and just not care? I wanted to tell him how small it made me feel, how cruel it was to spring that on me hours before the dinner. But I was afraid. Afraid of being called dramatic. Afraid of being seen as jealous. Afraid of losing what little peace we had left. So I said nothing. Because that's what I always did. I kept my pain quiet. I tucked it behind a smile. I could feel it in my chest, a slow, steady ache that wouldn't go away. And as I slipped on my heels that evening, I whispered to myself, just get through tonight. Don't make a scene. Don't show weakness. What I didn't know then was that this dinner, this one night, would become the line between who I used to be and who I was about to become. Because that was the night my silence became my curse. The night everything I'd been holding in finally came crashing down. And I didn't even see it coming. All week, I tried to convince myself I was fine. I smiled through work, forced laughter with my friends, even told my mom, yeah, we're good. But deep down, I wasn't fine. I was drowning quietly, and no one even noticed. The night before the dinner, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan turning round and round, thinking how love could spin so fast until it starts to blur. My chest felt heavy. Every version of myself, the one who believed, the one who hoped, the one who begged, they were all arguing inside me. And I pretended everything was fine. But deep down, I knew something was breaking beyond repair. If I don't go, I thought, he'll say I'm dramatic. But if I go, he'll see how easily I break. I kept imagining Tasha, his ex, the woman I'd heard too much about and too little at the same time. The way he'd talk about her voice, her career, how she gets his kind of jokes. Each compliment had felt like a pin pressed into my skin. So I asked my best friend, Zara. She rolled her eyes and said, "Girl, you better show up looking like the reason he even started dating again. Don't give her the satisfaction." But my other friend, Anita, shook her head. "No, Lydia. Don't let him pull you into this power game. Stay home. Protect your peace. You don't have to prove anything." I wanted to listen to Anita, but pride, that foolish pride, whispered louder. I told myself, no. I'll go. I'll show him I'm unbothered. So the next morning, I went shopping. I found a simple, off-shoulder black dress. It wasn't too flashy, but it hugged me in a way that reminded me I still had something beautiful left, me. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror, trying to look confident. I applied lipstick, red, bold, defiant, but my hands were trembling. I whispered, "You've got this," even though my voice cracked halfway through. When the cab pulled up, I climbed in, clutching my purse like a lifeline. Outside, the city was alive, people laughing, lights flickering, everything moving faster than my heart could keep up with. And then, we passed a wedding. A bride in white was laughing, her veil floating behind her like a promise. Guests were cheering, clapping, celebrating love. I turned my face toward the window, pressing my forehead to the cool glass. I wanted to smile for her, but I couldn't. Because all I could think was, how do two people go from that kind of love, to this kind of silence? The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror and said, "Big night?" I smiled weakly. Something like that. Inside, though, my stomach was tight. My pulse wouldn't settle. I kept hearing Marcus's voice from that morning, casual, careless, "Don't act weird, okay?" And I knew right then. No matter how good I looked, no matter how calm I acted, I was walking into a room where love had already died. I just hadn't buried it yet. That dinner was waiting for me like a storm I couldn't avoid. And I was about to walk right into it, smiling. The restaurant was one of those places that smelled of candle wax and old money, dim lights, slow music, everything polished, controlled, perfect. 12 people sat around that long mahogany table, all of them laughing a little too loudly, pretending they belonged. Marcus was in his element. He was charming, magnetic, that kind of man who could make you feel invisible even while holding your hand. He greeted everyone like a host at his own coronation, cracking jokes, pulling out chairs, ordering champagne. When we walked in, he barely introduced me. "This is Lydia," he said casually, already turning to high-five one of his colleagues. "Know my girlfriend." No warmth. Just Lydia. Like I was a name tag. I smiled, of course. I always smiled. That was my thing, keep the peace, keep your posture, keep pretending you're fine. Then, she walked in. Tasha. The woman whose name had lived rent-free in my head for months. She was dressed in red, not just any red, but that red. The kind that doesn't just get noticed, it announces itself. Her hair fell in soft curls over her shoulder, and her perfume, God, that perfume, I knew it. I'd smelled it once on Marcus's hoodie and pretended not to. The air shifted when she entered. Marcus's grin widened, a little too wide. Tasha. You made it, he said, his voice warm, familiar. The kind of warmth I hadn't heard in months. They hugged. Too long. Too close. Too familiar. I watched, frozen, as he pulled her chair out himself. He didn't do that for me anymore. As they talked, I caught pieces of their conversation, old stories, shared memories, inside jokes that didn't need explaining. He laughed with her in that unguarded, effortless way, the way he used to laugh with me. I laughed too, out of habit. Out of fear. Out of survival. Someone at the table said, Marcus, you two still have that spark, man. He grinned, glancing at me like I was part of the joke. Oh please, he said, Lydia knows I have a type. Everyone laughed. I forced a small smile, staring down at my plate, pretending the salad suddenly fascinated me. The waiter poured wine into my glass, and I took a sip, deep, steady, like medicine. But the laughter kept rolling. Marcus was on his second glass, leaning back in his chair, his confidence dripping like oil. Then it started, the comparisons. Remember when you used to make that spicy pasta, Tash? Lydia tried once, he chuckled, shaking his head, but it nearly killed me. The table laughed again. Even Tasha smiled, awkwardly, but she smiled. I felt my face heat up. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. My throat burned, from shame, from wine, from silence. But I stayed quiet. Because I'd been taught that grace was silence. Then came the moment. The one that still echoes. Marcus leaned toward me, eyes glinting with that cruel kind of amusement people use when they know you won't fight back. He said, loud enough for everyone to hear, Lydia's jealous already. You know what, babe? If you can't handle it, just pay for the party and go home. And they laughed. Every single one. I froze. The sound of their laughter was louder than the music, louder than my heartbeat. It wasn't the words that broke me. It was that everyone found them funny. Something inside me cracked, quiet but final. Like glass under pressure. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, that polite, dead kind of smile you wear when you realize you've been performing love for an audience that doesn't care. Then, as if the universe wanted to mark the moment, the waiter slipped behind me. A glass of red wine tipped. It splashed across my black dress, deep, dark red spreading like blood. The table gasped. Marcus laughed again, saying, oh come on, it matches your lipstick. That's when I knew. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore, it was awakening. Because in that moment, standing there with wine dripping down my arm and my heart pounding in my ears, I realized, I wasn't the woman he loved. I was the woman he tested his cruelty on. The laughter faded. The music carried on. I excused myself, smiling still, but something inside me had already gone quiet. That was the night I stopped waiting for him to change. That was the night I decided, enough. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream, or cry, or throw the wine back at him, though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I reached for my purse, opened it slowly, and pulled out my card. The waiter looked confused. Ma'am, are you? Yes, I said, my voice steady now, almost peaceful. Just bring me the check. Marcus turned toward me, laughing, that same lazy, arrogant laugh. You serious? You can't even take a joke? A joke. That's what it was to him, my humiliation, my pain, my worth. A joke. I stood up quietly. My chair scraped against the floor, cutting through the laughter around the table. People stopped smiling, unsure if they should look at me or look away. Marcus raised his glass, smirking, where are you going, Lydia? You can't just, I cut him off. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, the kind that slices through noise like glass breaking. "You're right," I said. "I can't take a joke. And I can't take being disrespected for sport." The room went silent. For a moment, even the background music hesitated. Then I turned, and I walked away. Outside, the night was cold. Rain ran down my face. I couldn't even tell if I was crying or if it was just the weather doing me a favor. I stood there on the sidewalk, in that stupid wine-stained dress, trembling, half crying, half laughing. Because suddenly, it hit me. Love isn't supposed to make you smaller. It isn't supposed to make you question your worth every time someone else walks into the room. It isn't supposed to hurt like this, not when you're the one who gave everything. I had spent years trying to prove I was enough. But enough for what? For a man who made a sport out of watching me break quietly? I took out my phone, my hands were shaking. His name sat there at the top of my messages, bold and bright, like a wound that wouldn't close. And then I did it. I pressed delete. No drama. No tears. Just delete. And somehow, it felt like breathing for the first time in months. I stood there, staring at the streetlights reflecting off puddles, thinking, this is what letting go feels like. Not peaceful. Not clean. Just necessary. I walked home that night, heels in my hand, rain soaking through my hair, and for once, I didn't replay his voice in my head. I replayed mine. The one that said enough. But here's the thing about walking away from someone like Marcus, they don't like being left. They like being in control. And as I fell asleep that night, exhausted but finally quiet inside, I didn't know one thing. He wasn't done with me yet. The story, my story, wasn't over. Don't miss the twist that changed everything. Because what came next turned my quiet escape into chaos. Subscribe now to Stories by TEE, because sometimes the real story begins after you walk away. By morning, my phone was a battlefield. Missed calls. Voicemails. Messages that started with "I'm sorry" and ended with "you overreacted." Marcus's tone had changed, no longer mocking, but still dripping with that quiet arrogance. He said, "You embarrassed me last night, Lydia. You could have just laughed it off. You know I was joking." Joking. That word again. The same word he used to cover up every small cruelty, every dig at my confidence, every night he made me feel like I was lucky just to be tolerated. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because I knew if I answered, I'd start explaining myself, and I was done explaining my pain to the person who caused it. By noon, social media had done its damage. Pictures from the dinner were everywhere, everyone smiling, wine glasses raised, perfect moments that hid the ugliness behind them. Someone had tagged me in a group shot. There I was, in the corner, fake smile, red stains still faint on my dress. The comments rolled in. "Hang in there, girl. You deserve better." He didn't have to say that. Pity. That's what it felt like, digital sympathy from people who'd laugh at the next post 5 minutes later. I deleted the tag. Then the app. And then I went silent. For 3 days, I didn't speak to anyone. I just sat with the silence, the kind that used to scare me, but now, it felt like company. No Marcus. No noise. Just me, and the ache of finally seeing things as they were. On the 4th day, I got a message from a name I never expected. Tasha. At first, I thought it was some cruel joke. But it wasn't. Her message was simple. "Hey Lydia, I don't know if it's my place, but I wanted to say, you didn't deserve that. He hasn't changed. He won't. You deserve better." I read it 3 times. And then again. And that's when it hit me, sometimes the warning doesn't come from your friends, or your gut. Sometimes it comes from the ghost of your replacement. That night, I opened a blank notebook. Not my phone. Not a chat window. A real notebook. And I started to write. Not about Marcus. But about me. Every red flag I ignored. Every moment I silenced myself to keep him comfortable. Every time I mistook anxiety for passion. The words spilled out like confession, like bleeding, but gentler. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel crazy. I just felt seen. By myself. Sometimes the aftermath isn't noise. It's silence. And sometimes, silence is the loudest answer. It's strange how you can wake up one day and realize the person you loved wasn't the problem anymore. It was the version of yourself you kept shrinking just to keep them comfortable. For weeks, I thought about that night, the laughter, the humiliation, the way the wine soaked through my dress like a scar I couldn't wash out. But the truth? That night didn't break me. It just showed me where I was already cracked. I had been staying for the idea of love, not the reality of it. The idea that patience could fix pride. That endurance could turn neglect into care. That if I just loved harder, he'd remember how to love gently. But love shouldn't feel like waiting for permission to matter. I started seeing the red flags I used to paint white, every dismissive joke, every comparison, every time he called me too sensitive when I was just asking to be respected. They weren't isolated moments. They were patterns. And I had been calling them normal. I started therapy. It felt awkward at first, like learning to speak a language I should have known all along, honesty. I reconnected with friends I drifted from. One of them told me, "You used to glow when you laughed, Lydia. Don't let anyone dim that again." And for the first time, I didn't roll my eyes or argue. I believed her. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was slow. Uneven. Quiet. Some days, I felt strong. Other days, I missed him, or rather, I missed who I thought he was. But every time I was tempted to look back, I'd open my journal. And I'd read the letter I wrote to myself one night when the silence felt too heavy to bear. Dear me. You don't need revenge to win. You don't need to prove anything to the one who couldn't see you. Sometimes, healing quietly is the loudest comeback. You are not too much. You were just too giving for someone too small to receive it. Love again one day, but never at the cost of your own voice. I folded that letter and placed it in my drawer, right next to the earrings he once gave me. One reminded me of who I was with him. The other, of who I was becoming without him. I used to think healing meant forgetting. Now I know it means remembering, but without the ache. If you've ever stayed too long in a love that hurt to hold, I want to hear from you. Tell me, what was your breaking point? Was it a word, a silence, a look across the table that finally made you see what you'd been pretending not to? Because maybe, someone else watching needs to know they're not alone. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories by TE, where every story reminds us that heartbreak doesn't end you, it awakens you. So stay with me, because somewhere out there, another story is unfolding. And maybe next time, it'll be the story of your healing. Some wounds don't bleed. They laugh at you across dinner tables, hidden behind jokes and half-smiles. They chip away at you, one small humiliation at a time, until you start apologizing for wanting the bare minimum, respect. But healing doesn't begin with revenge. It begins the moment you walk away, trembling, terrified, but free. Because leaving isn't weakness. It's remembering who you were before you forgot yourself for love. So if you're watching this and something in your chest aches, listen to it. That ache isn't loneliness. It's your soul begging to be seen again. Respect should never have to be begged for.